Aloha, welcome to the Build Vibrant Health podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about Hawaii and my most recent experience there. I'm back on the mainland in Phoenix, Arizona, arrived here a couple days ago and went through quite the culture shock arriving back. I've never cried leaving a place, but I really wasn't expecting to, but saying goodbyes in Hawaii, I was crying on and off all that morning. I cried in the airport and boarding the plane. The flight attendant asked me if I was okay or if I was just sad to leave. And so there's always someone that cries, but I was not expecting to have that reaction. It just was such a powerful, magical, really healing experience. And arriving back in Phoenix, it was a little bit of a shell shock. This morning, you can't see the sky. It is covered in white clouds, just really from chemtrails. So they're not actually clouds. And yesterday, I went to go take a walk outside, walked out the front door, and I'm so incredibly used to walking barefoot that I didn't even think twice about it and started walking down the sidewalk and realized that my feet were not on the bare earth, but on this concrete. And there's this lady walking up to me with her dog, and she kind of looks me up and down and looks at my feet. And then it hit me that I am not in a place where it is normal to just walk outside in your bare feet and get your toes in the sand and in the ocean like I'd been doing. And it really brought up a lot of grief and a lot of anger that we have created a culture that's normal. The life force energy that I felt in Hawaii was beyond words and just palpably felt in the body. I've never skipped so much in my life. As a little kid, you skip out of excitement or you skip in gym class, and I don't think I've skipped that much since being there. There was one point in time I was at the volcano and there was so much excitement flooding through my body that I was skipping over the rocks, and there was a point in time where my friend got concerned for me and he put his hand in front of me because he thought I was tripping when really I was just skipping for excitement and joy. And at first, when I arrived here, the first couple days, I didn't even unpack my bags, and I highly considered going back to Hawaii and was thinking, like, what the heck did I do? Why did I come back here? Did I make a mistake? But I did feel very called to come back to Arizona. I can't deny some of the feelings and signs that I received to come back to the mainland. It doesn't mean that it made it easier, but it did open my eyes and bring deeper awareness to some illusions and different perspectives that I've had since being away the past 2.5 months. And instead of being depressed and sad about not being there, finding ways to cultivate and resource back to the ocean and to the volcano and to the mana, to the power that the land has, and bring that here. Because we can cultivate health wherever we are, though the environment and the setting that we're in really does make a huge difference. And so finding ways in our everyday life to find vibrancy, to create health, and that starts within ourselves and also connecting in with nature, with Mother Earth, with our family, with our communities, with our animals. One thing that I loved about being in Hawaii was the abundance that the earth holds, that to have the ability to drive 5 minutes down the road to fill up with fresh spring water on a friend's land, and then another 5 minutes to go pick up raw milk and cream and honey, and then go jump in the ocean 10 minutes later and go pick some papayas or some amazing white pineapple, literally the best pineapple I've ever had in my life, and go pick that straight from the earth. What a beautiful blessing. And also what a also huge disconnect and realization that we as human beings, and in many cultures, not all, but especially in big cities in the United States, and I'm sure elsewhere, have gotten away from that way of life where we are so connected to the land, that we are free beings, that we're not sitting in front of a computer screen or a phone all day long, but we're interweaving play with work. And there are ways to do that here today in this modern world. It might take a new perspective. It might take some micro shifts in your life or some macrocosmic shifts in your life, but it is totally possible. And part of it begins with stepping into the unknown and trusting your path. For example, I didn't go into Hawaii with any expectations or even a timeline. I booked a one-way flight. I talked to a girlfriend on Christmas of 2022, so December 25th, and had a conversation about staying on her land and doing work trade. At this point, I loosely knew Erica through a superfood company that we both partner with, but I didn't know her to the level I know her now after living 2 months with her family and spending time on her farm and getting to experience a large part of Hawaii with her. We had a conversation about doing a work trade opportunity on her permaculture biodynamic land and farm and garden. And 4 days later, I found myself booking a flight to arrive on January 2nd to start the new year out. For those of you who don't know me, I experienced a lot of death and loss and grief and a lot of changes last year in my life. And I really wanted to get a fresh perspective and felt like a lot of the energy needed to move out through my body. A lot of signs for Hawaii kept coming up until they were really hard to ignore. And so I found myself on this flight, arrived really late at night in Hilo on the Big Island. And so when I woke up in the morning and looked out my window, I had this beautiful view of the ocean. There's something so beautiful and calming and mesmerizing and magnetic about the ocean. She is powerful medicine, and even just sitting by the ocean and feeling the negative ions wash through your body, getting the salt on your skin and your hair, even if you're not swimming in the ocean, is felt on a physical level, an emotional level, an energetic level, an emotional level. One of the most powerful practices that I implemented while in Hawaii was first thing waking up, driving down or walking down before I had a car, and getting to Lapahoehoe Point, which is this really sacred, has a lot of history, little point that you can jump off into the ocean, and it's got a beautiful view of the point, which now there's some waterfalls flowing out of it because there's so much rainfall in February. And if you go to my social media, Build Vibrant Health, you'll see some of the pictures from there. It's just so serene and so powerful. But every morning I found myself down there looking out at the ocean and meditating and praying and journaling, and then usually jumping out in the ocean depending on the circumstances of the weather. For the purposes of this podcast, I could go on and talk about all of the wonderful things and the abundance of the land and the food, but I really want to focus on 3 pivotal experiences. And one of these experiences started at the point, Lapahoehoe Point. And like I said, some mornings I would jump in the water. There was one morning in particular where the water was pretty choppy. Normally, if you go there between 6 and 8 a.m., the water's pretty calm. This day, there was some pretty big waves and there was a lot of swell going on, and I decided to jump in anyways. It's off of a boat ramp, and the boat ramp is just this concrete with some metal rebars poking out of it. Not in the best condition. The boat ramp's actually closed, but you can still jump off the walls of the boat ramp and into the ocean because it's pretty deep. And so I did that. But coming back, it was going to be a little bit more challenging because the waves were pretty strong and there was a pretty strong current you had to swim against. So I find myself swimming out of the ocean and getting back into the boat ramp. And as I'm going up the boat ramp to get out of the water, I'm holding onto the sides of the boat ramp, which are pretty slippery because there's a lot of algae growth there. I turned my back for one split second and this massive wave came and pummeled me to the ground, pummeled me to the concrete boat ramp with the metal rebar sticking out. So it knocked the wind out of me and dragged me out underneath this ocean wave where I sucked up a lot of water. I banged up my knee and my hands and my legs pretty good, got some scratches on my body. And as that wave washed back, I had enough time to gather myself to go sit on the wall of the boat ramp and catch my breath and breathe and get a just chance to relax my nervous system and take in what had just happened. But I really think had I not been that quick enough that another wave would have came and got me again. So that was really shook me up because I'd never been drug out by the ocean like that. And it really did, slam my body to the ground pretty hard. And I don't remember if it was that night or the night after, but I had a really intense dream. I won't go into all the details, but essentially I was told that I had 48 hours left to live. And in my dream, it felt so incredibly real. And there's been a couple of dreams the past year, a handful, 3 or 4 of them with like my beloved dog Andromeda and a family member and some loved ones that the dreams did end up coming true. And so this dream felt like one of those. And I wasn't sure if it was like a literal death or a spiritual death, but that I had 48 hours essentially to live. And so my body, my nervous system actually went into like a panic state around that. And I talked to a friend. I called a couple family members just to tell them I love them and to have some healing conversations, because in my mind I'm thinking, if I have 48 hours left to live, what am I going to do? And so after that, I just journaled and meditated, tried to soothe my nervous system. But what I realized is I had this really intense fear of death, which I didn't know I had, because I thought that I was living life fully. And I thought that I was doing the things that I wanted to be doing. And for the most part, I am. But there are certain things like starting this podcast, which I've been meaning to do for 2 years and been putting it off, that now that I've had this experience, I am implementing certain actions, but also just have a different perspective on things. And so later that day, I was like, okay, if today's day 1 of 2 that I have left on this physical plane in this timeline, what am I going to go do? So I drove down and I visited my sea turtle friends. There's this beautiful spot in Hilo where there's this cold, brackish water. It's a mix of the fresh water coming down from Mauna Kea, from the mountain summit to the ocean. And so it's this intermix of ocean water, but also like really cold, fresh spring water. And the sea turtles like to hang out there. It's this beautiful green blue water. And so I met a friend down there and we hung out with the sea turtles for a bit, and then the sun set, so we watched sunset and the stars came out, and listened to her play harp, which Mia, if you're listening to this, I love you. She's a wonderful harpist. And so we played harp, and we talked about the meaning of life and death and the dream world, and just had some really great conversations. And my nervous system felt a little bit more settled after that, but my dream was still very much on my mind. Went to bed, and then the next morning I woke up around 5:30 in the morning, checked my phone, which I normally don't do. I typically like to meditate and pray and go down to the point. But I had an impulse to check my messages, so I did, and got a text from a friend who was inviting me to go ocean kayaking with the whales. So of course I said, heck yes. If today is day 2 of my 48 hours left to live, then yes, I'm going to go kayaking with whales. So it was a beautiful morning. We kayaked out into the ocean, and it was the most epic experience with whales. It was so magical. There were a lot of whales breaching and whale tails. We saw some male whales fighting for a female. We saw a baby and mom whale. There was a point in time where like you could see whales pretty much from any direction. It wasn't a constant, but like, you just had to wait a couple minutes and then there would be a whale breach or whale jumping for joy out of the ocean. One point there was a baby and mom whale that popped up pretty close to our kayaks, and they were about 10-15 feet away from us. We got out of the kayaks. I unfortunately forgot my snorkel and goggles, but I still was able to swim next to them and be in the water, tread the water next to them. And that was such an amazing experience. I just felt so much awe and gratitude and like reverence for these amazing sacred creatures. Whales symbolize many things, including strength and wisdom and connection to the spiritual realm, especially around life and death. And so I thought it was really symbolic, given that dream, that this was, the following experience the next day that was brought into my life. And it was just such a cool opportunity to get to be out there in the deep blue ocean. I'd never been out there that far, and so to get out of the kayak and into the water was actually pretty nerve-wracking for me. Friends that I was with, it was like a normal occurrence to go swimming with the whales, and they had done this before, but for me it was a very new experience. And so getting to jump out and swim underwater and get to hear the whale songs is something I will never forget. I actually, if I want to remember Hawaii and this experience, I can go on YouTube, and I would actually recommend you do that. Go on YouTube and listen to whale songs and see what they sound like. It sounded like a very out of tune orchestra, but so amazing. And the little baby and mom that popped up next to us in the kayak had to have been a newborn baby. I'm 5'3" about, and the baby whale was smaller than me. So like newborn, like a day old to like 3 days old, like brand new to the ocean. The size and magnitude of these beings and just the consciousness that they hold as they're connected to the whole ocean really blows my mind, and it's still something that I'm trying to process and integrate. At one point in time, there was this little light that was coming from the depths of the ocean, and you could see it come from the deep blue waters and get closer and closer. And as I got closer, the luminescent light got brighter and brighter, and it was really cool to see coming from the depths of the ocean. And it was a manowar jellyfish that was just so beautiful. At this point I was out of the kayak and he was getting closer, so we jumped back in the boats. But I did get a little sting on my leg, not directly from him, but maybe some particles from his tentacles were loose, or her. I don't know if they have a gender, but I got stung, and when I got back to the beach, my leg was still kind of stinging a little bit. So I also had the first experience of peeing on myself to mitigate the sting, and that tremendously helped. So a lot of first new experiences. I remember getting our kayaks back on shore, and just being so incredibly grateful, having a tremendous amount of relief that I was still alive, and that I mean, it would have been a cool way to go out of this physical existence with the whales, but I was really actually happy to be on shore as well, and have that experience and be able to tell about it. And so the whole next day, my whole body was just humming for the whole reminder of that day. And then the whole next day, my body and my nervous system was just humming. I woke up the next morning and went down to the point and saw one of the most beautiful sunrises. And I can say that's true for almost every sunrise there, but saw one of the most beautiful sunrises and just felt so much gratitude and thankfulness to be alive and to be able to experience the gift of another new day with a fresh perspective. And out of all people that I ran into, there's this guy who has also been coming to the point every morning, and I noticed he has his own little morning routine that I never wanted to interrupt, and he ended up coming over to say hello, and his name is Running Bear, which is, if you're listening to this, Running Bear, I appreciate you. Running Bear comes over, and it turns out he is a death facilitator, death transitioner. I forget the exact words that he used to describe what he does with people. But the synchronicity did not escape me after that whole experience of what he does and who he is. And the death facilitator in the way of helping people learn what death is and transition from life into death and to be at peace with that, which is so incredibly beautiful because, like I said, I didn't know that I was afraid of death until I was faced with that dream and with the pummeling of the wave down on my body. I've come into a lot of contact with sickness and what felt like a lot of death through my physical body, and so I thought I wasn't afraid of it, but I guess the sickness and death and like wanting to live is not the same, and living life fully isn't the same thing as like also fully embracing death and the impermanence of life. And so it's lended a new perspective. But anyways, talking to Running Bear that morning was really cool, and getting to learn his perspective about death and life and how he helps people transition and cross over. So those 40 hours really challenged me to look at what I was doing in my life and see if I would do anything differently. And for the most part, I wouldn't do a lot of things differently, like going on adventures and traveling and really listening to where Spirit is leading me is really important. Focusing on my health and my own inner work, which are all things that I've been doing, but there's also things, like I said, with this podcast, which I have been putting off doing. There's more, kuleana is the Hawaiian word for like your purpose in your path here to help serve others, and so leaning more into what that looks like. And so I encourage you to do the same. If you were given 48 hours left to live, like what would you do differently? What would you want to change? What would you want to shift? And not coming from it from a place of fear, but really from a place of love and service, and looking at it from a broader perspective. What are those things that you could be doing to create more vibrancy and better health and freedom and vitality into your life so that you can better show up the way that Creator intended for you to live and be here and be a human being, not a human doing. So the second experience that I want to share is at the volcano. I had never seen a volcano before, and wow, I didn't really know what to expect, but the amount of like mana, life force energy coming from the earth in this particular section, coming from visiting Sedona, you can palpably feel certain spots on the land, certain energy vortex centers. This is like 100-fold. And you can see the magma, the earth that is heated up thousands of degrees and is just coming through the cracks of the volcano. The first time I looked at the volcano and saw Mount Kilauea erupting, I got chills from head to toe, like multiple times, and felt so mesmerized by what looks like this city of fire. There's 3 or 4 little different pockets on the earth floor where the magma's coming out from. And even though you're viewing it from a distance, you can still get pretty close, but it's still it's pretty far out there. So you can see the magma bursts, but you have no idea that they're actually like 100 to 150 feet tall of this fire coming out of the earth, which is so intense. There was a point in time where I laid some tea leaves down on the ground and said a little prayer and set an intention. And at that moment, I felt so much emotion in my body. I felt a lot of emotional pain, especially in my heart area, a lot of grief and a lot of sadness. And it just enveloped my entire being, and I started crying. I started weeping. I had to sit on the ground, and the friend that was with, he just held the small of my back and just rubbed my back up and down and just like held space for me to process and let those emotions move through my body. A lot of what came up was the grief and the loss with my soul dog Andromeda and the situation that happened with that, and still some of the unforgiveness I held towards myself and the anger at the situation and at all parties involved, including myself, and realizing that it was time to really start to let go of that and see how deeply that was held in my cellular tissues and body. And there was one point where I just laid down on the ground. Also, some memories from my marriage came through, which I thought had been, like that's 6 years behind me now, 5 years behind me. And that some things from that to be healed came up. And it was a really powerful moment to let the earth hold me and to see the fire from the earth as all of this was happening. If you can envision like a battery charge, and you plug your cell phone in, and then you see that battery like electricity light over the battery, that's how I felt for a lot of my time in Hawaii, but especially at the volcano, like laying on the earth, what was happening. It was like literally charging my cells up, charging my body. It's hard to even put into words what that feels like, but that's maybe a good metaphor to relate to you how I felt. The second time going back to the volcano was on a full moon. It was the Leo full moon, and I felt so incredibly pulled. I was like, I asked a friend if she wanted to come with me and go for the full moon, and then it hit me that the Leo full moon it made so much sense of why there was such a strong pull to the volcano. Leo is a fire sign, and so going to the volcano on this fiery moon was so incredibly fitting. And we sat there for a while and watched the glow of the fire and the earth and the full moon rising behind us. It started to mist, and at that moment there was this beautiful moon bow that stretched over from side to side over the entire volcano. And it was so incredible to see this rainbow, because a moonbow is a rainbow at night. So it's like 9 o'clock at night. It's really dark out, and you can see the volcano with this beautiful rainbow over it and the full moon behind us. And that was also like a charging my body experience up. And what a cool experience. We ventured down the road a little bit, and the road gets pretty uneven because in one of the more recent eruptions a couple years ago, the whole crater actually fell in and disrupted a lot of the road. And so you have to be careful where you're walking so you're not walking on uneven spaces in the dark. But we walked quite a bit along that road and got to be a little bit closer to the volcano. And what was really cool was getting to close your eyes. And if you can close your eyes right now, as long as you're not driving or something, and envision and hear the sound of the ocean, waves crashing against the shore. That is what it sounds like at the volcano, actually. The sound of the wind and the magma booms almost sound like waves crashing along the ocean shore or planes taking off or landing from an airport. Like, that's how loud it is. And Running Bear, one morning at the point, had showed this book to me called The Mana Keepers. And there's this quote in there that says, if you listen closely, all sounds of nature mimic the same humming sound of life itself. And it's something along those lines. I'm not quoting it exactly, but it's a powerful reminder of how everything is so connected. The humming of our nervous system, the crashing of waves against the shore, the bursting of the magma, the sounds of the bird, the wind blowing gently or crazily. All of these sounds all have the same original humming sound of life itself. Mount Kilauea stopped erupting the week I was leaving, so I'm really grateful that I got the experience to go to the volcano a couple times while I was there and while it was erupting. It's one of the most active volcanoes, and so I'm sure it'll start soon, but they don't know when. It could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months, but as of right now, there's not a sign of activity there, at least while I'm recording this. The third experience that I'd like to share about here today is the weekend before I left Hawaii. I got the opportunity to go down to Waipio Valley, which is one of 7 sacred valleys on the windy east side of the Big Island. It's also known as the Valley of Kings, and there used to be communities, Native Hawaiians who would cultivate the land and live with their families and canoe and really live off of the abundance of the land. It's a really sacred place that has a lot of history in the Hawaiian language, which is really literal oftentimes in the meaning of words. Waipio means curved waters, and that is really true because there's like 2 points and there's a black volcanic sand beach in between the two, and it's kind of like a little U shape, and there's this river once again that flows from Mauna Kea down out into the ocean, and it's this beautiful, like kind of icy cold when we were there because there was so much rainfall the month before. That goes out into the ocean, and some waterfalls on the sides of the mountains looking out. And it's just the serenity and the peace that you feel there is palpable. What I didn't know going down to Waipio was that it was going to be a really steep drive, that it was an extremely steep drive. We had to have 4-wheel drive vehicle to get down there, and that there would be wild horses at the bottom. Not necessarily wild horses in the sense of completely wild. They are pretty used to humans coming down to the beach. I'm sure some people feed them, and they're pretty used to people in that area. But what was really synchronistic is earlier that day, part of the community, Be Open community that I'm in around animal communication, was poking around in some old webinars, which I haven't touched since I've opened the platform, since I've been a member, which is like July of last year. And finally opened up one of the webinars and felt so incredibly drawn to watch the one on horse healing and horse retreats. And I thought it was kind of odd, to be honest, because I took horseback riding lessons when I was in like 8th grade, but didn't have any sort of association recently with horses. But I watched the video anyways, and what really stood out to me was the intuitive nature of horses and how they can really mirror us, which all animals can, but how horses can really mirror us and how they choose the human to work with and move things through our body and help process trauma and deep things that we might not even be conscious or aware of, certain programs and patterns that we are playing out in our everyday lives. And so that was the basis of this video and this healing retreat, horse retreat that people are going on and giving testimonials about. So I put that in my back pocket and ended up going down to YPO later that afternoon and seeing the wild horses there. There was a point in time where I wandered over to the horses area, or like went in their general direction, and still pretty far away from me was this beautiful brown horse whose mane and tail was flowing in the wind, and she was standing over by the ocean looking out. And so I snapped a picture of her, actually started taking a little video, and at that moment she looked directly at me and started walking towards me. My heart skipped a couple of beats because she's just this beautiful creature and this amazing view of the ocean all around. And she stopped to like itch her leg or grab some grass. But then she looked back up at me and continued straight on until she was directly in front of my face. And we had a really special moment, a really cool connection together for the next hour. There was a point where I asked her if we could connect in and communicate and if I could do a little reading with her. And she said yes. And what followed, I am going to forever keep in my heart and remember this experience. What I felt in her physical body when I asked her what she wanted to show me or tell me was this immense amount of sadness and grief throughout her body. And when I asked her what it was, what it was about, I got a sense that it was something about the land, but I couldn't get further information on that. I think had I sat with things a little bit longer in my own physical body, I could have sat with that a little bit longer and maybe understood deeper on what she was trying to communicate. Asked her a couple more questions and had some fun, and then did a body map. So in an animal, you can body map what's going on physically in their body by asking asking their permission, if it's okay to body map or body scan their body, imposed essentially on your body. So I usually start at the top of my head and scan down. My arms would be like her front legs. My legs would be her back legs. And so I'm doing this body scan. I'm starting from my head to my toes, and I get down and everything feels really neutral, which is normal sometimes. Sometimes you get a sensation or something like in your shoulder or your chest or wherever. Today, I didn't feel anything. I just felt pretty neutral until I got down to my ankles. And when I got down to my ankles, she looked at me directly, and she picks up her back left ankle and turns her head around and starts gnawing and licking at her back left ankle as if it's bothering her. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because I didn't feel anything different in my left ankle, And then it hit me. I had the realization that nothing felt different. But actually what was happening is she was picking up what was going on in my body. And there could have been something also going on with her ankle, we could have been mirroring each other. But the weekend prior to this, I went for a run and rolled my ankle pretty good with an old injury that had come up again. And so what it felt like to me was her sharing and imparting wisdom to listen to my body further and listen to what my ankle was trying to tell me and to honor that. I've never had a body scan in person where an animal like starts paying attention to a certain part where I'm scanning. So that was really cool experience, and just a testament to show how connected we can be to animals and to the earth. And after we disconnected, I just sat in awe and gratitude, and it was one of those moments where I took a mental picture of, and I can feel that viscerally in my body as I share and talk with you on this experience. And so we just sat by the ocean, and she nibbled on her grass, and I sat on the earth and just said thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity. Animals have mastered unconditional love. They are such special beings, and we can learn so much from them. Sometimes I think we have a dog or a cat or an animal, fill in the blank, and we think that we're taking care of them, that we're helping them, and we're providing for them. But really, I think the animals in our lives have so much more to teach us and are here to help us. Yes, maybe emotionally and like go on fun adventures, but they're always here to teach us deeper soul lessons, both now in this physical existence, but also in the afterlife. So my dear Andromeda has been teaching me a lot of lessons, both during her physical experience here, but also since she's crossed over. Like, I wouldn't have gone to Hawaii without her, and I could feel her presence so strongly as I was connecting in with this horse. I could even like feel energetically where she was there and almost could envision her like looking at the horse, not really sure what to do with this being, maybe trying to hurt it because she's a cattle dog, but I could really feel her presence there. And I even get confirmation just saying that. So all of these experiences have a common theme of connection to the earth, connection to our life force energy within, and really connecting in with your purpose and feeling that physically in your body. And maybe you're living in Phoenix, or maybe you're living in a big city, maybe you're not on the big island. But how can you cultivate these feelings of mana, these feelings of life force energy, these feelings of freedom? How can you, even if they're little micro shifts, create more joy in your life and allow your body to feel emotions that maybe haven't been safe to feel? Or maybe you haven't had the resources or tools to be able to feel those emotions, or to be able to tap into like what really is your true desire, what is your purpose here. And I'll leave you with a question once again of what would you do if you only had 48 hours left to live? How would you be living life differently? So many people wait until their next vacation time or until they're like 60 to retire and start enjoying life. But I encourage you to go do those things that make you feel alive and make that a part of your lifestyle. This life is beautiful and it's a gift, and there's so much opportunity here. Embrace that. Mahalo for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and like this episode. Share with a loved one, a family member, a friend who you think could benefit. We're going to be sharing all information on building vibrant health through our environment, through spirituality, sprinkling in some animal communication, looking at our built environments, looking at food as medicine, community as medicine, and all of those facets to really build a life of vibrant health and freedom. Mahalo, and have a beautiful rest of your day.